Can older drivers rely on Tesla FSD, full self-driving? I saw this question on the internet recently and wanted to weigh in with my opinion. First of all, who am I to talk about this? I'm 68 years old. I've had a Tesla for 4 years, going on 5, and I've always had FSD. I've always been very interested in how good it would be. Initially, it wasn't very good, but it has become better and better. And at this point, I would say an older driver can definitely rely on Tesla FSD if they know how to go about it. As long as you're willing to learn how to set it up and get used to it, it can be extremely safe and an amazing helper for an older driver. Let me just give you an example. A few weeks ago, my wife and I drove out to Dallas, Texas to watch the total solar eclipse with some friends. I had never driven inside of Dallas before. I had gone through it, but it was basically staying on one freeway all the way through, with maybe 1 or 2 interchanges that I had to go through. This time I had to go into the heart of Dallas, find our hotel. From the hotel, find our way over to our friend's house, find our way to the nearest Walmart, all of those things. And the traffic in Dallas is absolutely crazy. One thing I learned while I was there is that because Texas doesn't have state income tax, they don't have a large pool of money to build roads and freeways. And so they have expressways that charge tolls, and those tolls then pay for those roads. And if you're not on a toll expressway, you're then on the ordinary roads, which are always crammed. We were there for 4 days, and I am convinced that without Tesla full self-driving, I would have had a much, much harder time getting around, and I would have felt far less safe. I did have to learn when it was safe to trust it and when it wasn't. Once or twice it did some goofy things and I had to intervene. Once or twice I intervened when I shouldn't have, and I ended up then having to go a longer way around. But the car, when I handed control back to it, very capably and confidently and safely took me to where I needed to be, even though it was maybe a couple miles longer getting there because I had gotten a little worried about it. So yes, you can definitely rely on Tesla FSD. I'm currently using FSD version 12.3, and it is extremely good. I'm anxiously waiting for Tesla FSD 12.4 because I hear it's even better, and 12.5, which will be out a few months after that, better still than 12.6. And so we're going to see some tremendous increases. Now, who shouldn't use Tesla FSD? Well, if you're not willing to learn how to interact with the car, how to know when you should take over and when you shouldn't, and be willing to experiment a little, and be willing to work with the computer settings on the screen, because that can be a little daunting, especially for older people that aren't used to it. In those cases, it may require someone to give that person some help, and maybe even drive with them for some period of time. When I first got my Tesla Model 3 in July of 2019, I loved to show it off to other people. And so if someone was interested, I would take them over to a big parking lot near where I lived and say, hey, let me show you how to drive it, and then you can try it out yourself. Some people weren't interested. Some were very interested. Some were interested in riding with me, but not trying it for themselves. So we all have different preferences in those areas, but those who tried it were always very impressed. It just accelerates so smoothly and effortlessly, and when you release the gas pedal, I'll call it that even though it doesn't have gas, it's an accelerator pedal, that's too many syllables to say. So when you release the gas pedal, when you take your foot off it, the car actually starts slowing down as if you'd put your foot on the brake. At first it takes a little bit to get used to it. It took me maybe an hour and a half, 2 hours tops. And with a little coaching, you can get that a lot quicker, but I didn't have anybody to coach me. But what I love is that for most of my driving time in my Tesla, I don't have to use my brake. I just back off on the gas pedal, and I've learned how to feather it back just to slow down a little bit when I need to, how to estimate how soon it's going to come to a complete stop. There are some settings you have to make depending on how you want it to behave. You can have it behave like an old, I call them dinosaur cars, internal combustion engines, where if you take your foot off the brake, the car starts to roll, right? Or you can have it set so that even when you take your foot off the brake, like at a red light, the car is simply going to wait until you tell it to go by pressing on the gas pedal on the accelerator, the go pedal. So I would definitely say older drivers can rely on Tesla FSD. However, for those who may be a little less experimentally minded, it would help to have someone who's familiar with the car and how it works, help them get it set up, help them get comfortable with it, maybe even drive with them for a couple of weeks until they're confident and know that they'll be able to use it to extend their driving years safely. Thanks for listening.